one of the questions that we get a lot is, how does life insurance work? And let's talk about that for a minute, because I think you'll find that insurance is one of those things that's important. I mean, why do people buy life insurance? Is it an investment, or is it protection against premature death? Or both? Yeah, I think it can be both. And there are basically two types of policies, okay? There's what's called term insurance and then permanent insurance. And let's assume for a minute that we had a 40-year-old and we had 10 million of them. Okay, and that in actuarial terms, that's called a radix, all right? And we know in that first year that of that 10 million 40-year-olds, if they were all started in a homogeneous grouping, so they were all healthy, they didn't smoke, they could pass a physical and so on, we know that maybe 1 out of 1,000 will die, all right? And then 5 years later, maybe it's 1 out of 750. All right. And 10 years later, maybe it's 2 out of 1,000. And those numbers keep increasing, accelerating, until we can account for the entire 10 million. So what this means is that if 1 out of 1,000 died at the end of that year, you would have 10,000 fewer people in that population, right? And then the next year, you'd have 15,000 more people that would be out of that population. So this is called an actuarial science. The probabilities of death are very, very defined. We don't know who, but we know how many. And of course, then there's that old joke about the Sicilian actuaries who know who, why, when, and all the rest of it. So anyway, that may be a joke that no one gets. Anyway, you got it. All right. So if we've got one person out of 1,000 dying and they want $1 million worth of insurance, how much do they have to put into the pot in order to have $1 million at the end of the year to pay that one person who died? Because the other 999 are going to pay premiums, but they're going to be alive, right? That's the way insurance works. So let's say they have to put in $900. All right, and here maybe they have to put in $1,200. And here maybe they have to put in $1,500, and so on. So if we graph this, it's going to look like this. Anybody recognize that? What is that? It's a compound interest curve, right? It's the same principle, only it's compound interest applied to the predictable probabilities of death as opposed to money, as we talked about before. Okay, so here the first year it was $900, and then it was $1,200 and $1,500 and so on up there. So how much did my $1 million life insurance policy cost me? So if I'm one of those 40-year-olds and I buy a $1 million policy and I start at $900, how much did my policy cost me? Well, if you don't know the answer, I would not be surprised, because you can't calculate it, right? Tell me when you're going to die and I'll tell you what it cost. Because if you died the first year, what did it cost? $900. But if you died in the 20th year, how much did it cost? It cost the sum of, all these premiums that you paid, right? So the only place on this entire curve that we can know the cost for sure, mathematically, is at this place right here. And that point right there on that curve, we'll call it life expectancy. Now, there's a lot of confusion about what life expectancy means. Okay? Most people think life expectancy means how long I'm expected to live, right? So if you're born, they say your life expectancy is 73 if you're a male and 75 if you're a female. But what's your life expectancy if you're 73? Huh? Two more years? Yeah, that's a good guess. I see your logic. So, for a 73-year-old, their life expectancy is probably 12 years. So out to age 85. Okay? And if you're 85, what's your life expectancy? You know, it could be another 7 or 8 years, see? So life expectancy is based on how old you are at the point in time when you're asking that question, all right? So when they say your life expectancy is 73 years old or 72 years old, that's for a newborn baby. You know, if you're 10 years old, your life expectancy is probably 78. If you're 21, your life expectancy might be 80. If you're 65, your life expectancy could be 88, 87, something like that. And of course, we know that people are living longer. I mean, I think it's predicted that like 12 to 15% of the population will live past age 100 in the next 50 years. So anyway, so here's how you measure life expectancy. All right, it's a bell-shaped curve that looks like that. All right, where 50% of this group is dead and 50% of the group is alive. So you have a 50-50 chance of getting to the other side of that line, okay, starting here. All right, so that's the definition of life expectancy. So if we take and we add up the premium every year that's going to be paid, the sum of that premium equals 74% of the face amount. So if I buy $1 million policy, how much will I pay in premium? In aggregate sum between now starting the policy and at life expectancy. How much would that be? $740,000, right? Okay. So the answer to the question of how much did my life insurance cost me, it cost me $740,000 to buy $1 million policy starting today, you know, based on life expectancy. But if I am unfortunate and live past life expectancy, and I get out to the place where 2/3 of the group is dead, okay, that premium now goes up to 119%. So that means it's $1,190,000 to own $1 million policy out to the 2/3 point. So if let's say life expectancy, well, let's say we're talking about a 21-year-old, life expectancy would be, let's say, 79, okay? So this would be like 85, let's say. So if they lived out to 85, they'd pay $1,190,000. But that's only 2/3 of the group. 1/3 still alive. If we go out to the second standard deviation, which is 95% of the group is dead, you know, now we're out to age like 92, that premium goes up to 240%. So now you're going to pay $2,400,000 in premium to keep $1 million policy. Now, I know you guys aren't MBAs in finance, but does that seem like a good deal? To pay $2.4 million in premium for $1 million policy? Does that seem like a good deal? Matt, is that something you'd be willing to do? Would you like to sign up for that today? Okay. But that's the mathematics of life insurance. Every life insurance company in America works on this math. Okay? Doesn't matter what company it is. New York Life, Mass Mutual, Prudential, John Hancock, Pacific Life, they all work on this math. All right? Now, this curve is term insurance. Okay, that's how term insurance works. And so when somebody buys term insurance, and you know, you sit down with an insurance agent, and they say, "Let me sell you $1 million policy," and at your age today, you know, $1 million life insurance policy, Lucas, for your age would probably be $300 a year for 10 years. So, you know, $3,600 to have that amount. But then at the end of 10 years, that premium is going to go up to maybe $450, and then at the end of 10 more years, it's going to go up to $900, and then at 10 more years, so it's going to stair-step up exactly the way this is stair-stepping up. So the point is that, and it goes back to what I said before, tell me when you're going to die and I'll tell you what to do, okay? Because if you're going to die down here, term insurance is a great buy, all right? But if you want insurance for your whole life, okay, then this becomes pretty expensive to be able to keep it.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.